Here we go. All right, we might have topped off at 73.
Okay, well then I'll get us started. So I want to welcome everyone to this pre-conference workshop of the 20th Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. NWILL wishes to acknowledge that the territory called North America, now primarily occupied by descendants of European colonizers and other immigrants, is the rightful land of Indigenous Native American and First Nations populations. We are all responsible for understanding the history of colonization and genocide of Indigenous people and must commit to learning, building relationships, sharing stories, and taking action to support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. We encourage you to learn more about the Indigenous people whom the land you occupy rightfully belongs. Please visit the document section of the conference platform to learn more. Today's date is August 31st, 2021, and this session is titled, You Had Me at Data, Using Statistics to Up Your ILL Game. And it will be presented by Alena Miller, Jenny Rosenfeld, and Tony Melvyn. My name is Stacey, and along with my co-host, Johannes, we'll be the conveners for this session. The session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. They retain the copyright to the information and are presenting and may request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request to the Northwest ILL Committee Chairperson. However, at this time, it is planned that recordings will be available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. If you have questions during the session, please use the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will pose these to the presenters at the end of the presentation. The door prize keyword will be revealed between the presentation and the Q&A session. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the session. So please see the door prize link in the event Mobi menu if you have questions as well. When the Zoom webinar ends, please complete the post-session survey in Event Mobi. It is just one question and is in the session feedback at the bottom of the sessions page. So on that note, I will turn the session over to our presenters.
All right, thank you, Stacey. Hopefully everyone can hear me well. Welcome to our statistics workshop. And today we're going to focus on data that you can access from OCLC usage statistics. And that's available at www.stats.oclc.org. And we'll show that URL about 100 times in this presentation, so don't worry. My name is Alena Miller. And let me advance the slide here. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Tony Melvyn and Jenny Rosenfeld, who are going to walk you through today's modules. So hi, Jenny and Tony. At least on my screen, Jenny is up higher on the, on the camera than Tony is. And the three of us work out of the OCLC office in Dublin, Ohio. Before we jump into the agenda, I wanted to thank those of you who completed our survey. As we sort of expected, we do have a wide variety of types and sizes of libraries with us, but it's weighted a bit towards small and medium academics as well as public libraries. So we're glad to have a really good variety. And most of you said that you are using and sharing some statistics, but you're interested in doing more. And the chart here shows the topics and the outcomes that were of most interest to you. And I was pleased to see that everyone was wanting to know more about exactly what they should be tracking. Pretty much, most people answered that. And then also we're interested in some of the specific modules. And so we're going to be able to, definitely help you with what to track, as well as dive deeper into several specific areas. So our agenda today is we're going to go over real quickly over the pre-work. Hopefully most of you had a chance to have a quick look at that. And then I'm going to pass off to Tony and Jenny to go through the several modules. Those will be on lending efficiency, custom holdings, automations, and collection development. And then for anyone who does pay or charge for ILL items, we have a link for you to get a short recording on how you can monitor charges that are made with interlibrary loan fee management, or IFM. And then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. We'll actually pause at the end of each module, check the chat for any questions that you may have put in there. And we'll also have Q&A time allotted at the end. And given the title of our presentation, there are plenty of Jerry Maguire memes smattered throughout this presentation. So we apologize in advance that we are making 1990s movie references throughout. So hopefully if you're not familiar with Jerry Maguire, it'll encourage you to have a look at it. If you did look at the pre-work recording that was available in EventMobi, and I think I emailed it to a lot of you folks if you got signed up by maybe late yesterday. That's great. If you didn't, that recording is still out there. You can access it after the session. Basically, we just wanted to kind of cover the reasons why usage statistics were so important and make sure that everybody knew how to get into their usage statistics at www.stats.oclc.org. And then just a couple of other key concepts. Knowing that everyone has somewhat different experience and background knowledge, I did want to mention that some of the topics we discussed today may not be too familiar, or you may feel like you need to have a brush up on them. And so I wanted to mention that we did do a virtual workshop series that's available in the OCLC Community Center. So if you get yourself signed in there, you can get to the events page, and all 5 workshops are kind of all together on one page. And so I would encourage you to check out any of those topics that you feel rusty on, or if they're brand new to you, great. We tried to start at the beginning and talk about why each of these is very important. And we're kind of covering a lot of those same topics, but today from the statistics angle. Let's see if there was anything else on that. Oh, there are, with the recordings out there, there are the slides. So if you want to flip through more quickly, you can look at the slides, and we have checklists for each of those. So you can kind of make sure that you're on track with what you should be doing in each of those areas. If you don't know how to get into the community center, everyone should be able to get their WorldShare ILL credentials. Iliad users, Tapasi users, and WorldShare ILL folks, you can all get into that community center. If you don't know how to do that, OCLC support will be happy to help you and get you those credentials. So in that pre-work recording, we just went over the overview reports, and basically the borrowing. So this borrowing report I'm showing here gives you the number of requests that you produce each month, and some other data that you may want to dig into. And also there's a lender activity overview report that shows the number of requests that you received and can give you an idea of your basic performance as a lender. And again, you can watch that pre-work recording if you want to get all the details on these reports. And then I also talked just a little bit about how to use data to tell a story, because we think that's really important. So you want to use this data to make charts that show trends, and then could be used to recommend changes. And then lastly, in that overview, I gave a list of reports that we would be talking about today in the different modules. And if you already had a chance to download those, great. You can play around with those as we're talking, and you can ask questions about things that you're seeing in those reports. If you haven't, you can go back later and download those, and we'll have our email address at the end of the presentation. You can send us any questions. So rather than read off all those reports, I think I will just pause for a second, see if there were any questions in the chat that we should cover. Were there any questions about the pre-work or how today's format, what we're going to do today?
Alena, we have no questions in the chat.
Excellent. Okay, then I'm ready to hand over to Tony for module 1.
Great. Thank you, Alena. And I want to put a big shout out to the Northwest ILL Committee for inviting us. The last time I was at the Northwest ILO conference was 10 years ago at the Sylvania campus of Portland Community College. Great place, great conference. So today I'm going to talk about checking lending efficiencies. Lending is important in the ILO world. It's the other half of the interlibrary loan operation. So why don't we forward here? So our goals in this module are basically to assess your library's lending. How is your lending operation doing? And are you being efficient? And where are you being efficient? One of the key reports for lending is the Resource Sharing Lender's Reason for No report. I might refer to it as RFN as I go through this. That's just basically the jargon. So I think Alena earlier mentioned that we asked you to export the data into Excel and then sort the reasons for no so that you can check to see what is your number one reason for saying no to request. That is always critical in assessing how your library is doing in lending and to spot possible problems or issues that you may not know about. Also, just recently introduced to WorldShare ILL and TAPASA is the turnaround time dashboard. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of my presentation. So to improve your lending efficiencies, there are a couple of things that we think you need to take a look at. My colleague Jenny, who's going to be presenting the bulk of this presentation, has done a lot of work in the past 2 years on identifying libraries that were basically letting almost every request age out of the system without responding to them. And you can imagine if you have a request and you're a 16-day to respond lender, that request is sitting in a file for 16 days before it's automatically aged. So that's one thing that we really highly recommend that you take a look at. How many requests are you allowing to age out? And what can you do to perhaps change that? In some cases, we've seen libraries who have set their days to respond lending to 2 days, and maybe that was just a little bit too ambitious. So you might want to look at your days to respond and determine, are you able to respond to these lending requests in the time that you listed in the policies directory? Also, really important, and it's probably, I think, Jenny might correct me here, one of the top 5 reasons system-wide reason for no is not owned. And that basically is an indication that perhaps your holdings in WorldCat are no longer up to date or are not current. So if you're seeing a lot of not owned requests in your lender RFN report, you should investigate that. We provide you with the OCLC record numbers so that you can supply those to your good friends in the cataloging side of the library. Send a list of those OCLC record numbers to the cataloging staff, ask them to investigate, and perhaps they will then move to have those holdings removed. So the fewer requests that you get for things that you actually don't own, the better you have, more time you have to respond to those requests that you can. And then also take a look at how many times you're saying in use on loan. I don't know if you've not heard, but in the last year, we have offered a new service called real-time availability. There is the link right there. It's an amazing new service that actually goes out and takes a look at your library's catalog when a request comes in from a borrowing institution. And if that request is identified as being checked out in your library, we will automatically say no to it with a reason for no of system checked availability. There is some configuration that we need to do here at OCLC. So that link will basically take you to a website that will explain the process and also provide you with a link to a form that you can fill out and then send to OCLC, and then we'll try to get your real-time availability set up. So just imagine the number of requests that you say in use on loan, those will no longer appear in your lending queues. Next. So here's a real quick blow-up snapshot of the lender reason for no report. There are multiple reasons for supplying, and I want to point out a couple of differences between the two types of reasons for no. You'll notice here that we have auto deflection and deflection set up. So those are automatic reasons for no. Those are requests that you will never see in your lending queue because they're deflected before they even get to your institution. So if you haven't taken a look at your reasons for no report, it would be a really good idea to do so. If you set up deflections and you want to test and see whether or not the deflection is working appropriately, this is where you do it. If you're finding that you're getting lots of auto deflections, maybe your deflections are too severe, or if you're not getting the deflections that you think, it allows you to go back and take a look and work on those deflections to get them to work up properly. The other reasons for no are basically the ones where the request comes into you as a lender and you respond no to them, such as in use on loan, except if you have real-time availability, or lost or not owned.
Tony, there was a quick question in the chat that to explain deflections, those are things that the lenders won't supply. Could you just remind everyone where you can set those up?
Sure. So deflections are set up in your policies directory, and you can set up deflections for any number of criteria. You can deflect based off of the type of request. So if you never ever lend copies, you can deflect all copy requests. You can then slice and dice the deflection. So you might lend copies, but you don't lend copies that come from e-serials or other electronic content. You only lend copies from your print collection. So you can set up a deflection based off of the format. You can also set up deflections based off of max cost. So if you charge and always charge, and the institution that's borrowing from you has set a max cost of 0, the request will be automatically deflected. You can also even further define it by groups. So you can deflect based off of groups that you belong to, be they profile groups such as Elvis or shares, or custom holding groups that you've created. So if you want to say, I want to charge everyone that's not in my consortia, you can set up a deflection that says max cost is 0, but not if it's coming from my consortia member. So that's the basic process. And
yeah, I was going to remind people that workshop series that I mentioned at the beginning. We have an hour long, I think, at least 45 minutes, about all the different things you can do with deflections. So that's one of those topics that folks might want to brush up on. So, yep, but that's where those surface themselves here is in our reasons for no. So great, thanks.
So yeah, when you take a look at deflections, be careful, because again, in some cases, we've seen users do the exact opposite of the deflection that they wanted to create. So sometimes they didn't mean to deflect all copies, and that's in fact what they were doing. So when you set up a deflection, always go and check your lender's reasons for no report and take a look at the reasons for the deflections for every request. You will see every request that you received and the deflection that was given for it.
Tony, we have another question in the chat. I find that many times with journals, our holdings are correct on OCLC, but the borrower has requested from us anyway, even if our holdings end before or start after the date they want. I'm not sure if this is because of automation or because of the IOL interface that they are using. Maybe they cannot see the OCLC holdings the way I can in Iliad.
Wow, that's a really good question. So I think there are two reasons for that. We do display holdings information, and we do encourage libraries to add both their local holdings records to WorldCat so that other libraries can see what they own on a particular journal title, the ranges and all that. Also with our knowledge base, we display the knowledge base holdings in WorldShare ILL and TPASA. That will be coming soon to our friends who are using Iliad. The other thing I would say is sometimes, and I'm not sure why, a borrowing institution may just select your library. Maybe you're the only one, or maybe you're one of 3 or 4, and they will just send it to you if they don't see your LHRs, and just go ahead and send it to you and think, I'm good. I will put out a shout to automations here, because if you're using automations, the automation service actually goes out and selects lenders based off of your LHRs and your KB holdings. So you don't have to sit there and select based off of the holdings that you're seeing. It's also using smart lender strings. So even beyond just finding and selecting those lenders that own that particular journal issue, it goes even further and takes a look at how many requests they have in their lending queue and what their current lending turnaround time is. And then it weights that response based off of that. So not only will you get requests using ARM, Automated Request Manager, based off of LHRs and KB holdings, but also based off of the lender's ability to respond. So if a lender has, say, 200 requests in their lending queue and another lender has, say, 30, and they both have equal turnaround time, it's always going to go to that library 30 requests before it would go to the one with 200 based off of the queue. So that's something that you should take a look at. I think my presentation is still going on, right?
Yes, it is. And we need to keep moving, or we're going to get try to not get down the rabbit holes, but try to give you guys information
again,
where we can where you can get more information. We'll try to stick on statistics today as much as possible. So
yeah. So this was brought up before. Again, taking a look at your lender reasons for no, and as you're sorting them, if you're finding a lot of not owns, that is a good case, again, to go to your cataloger, investigate with them, and get your holdings up to date. And to put a shout out to another colleague of mine, I think she's actually in the audience, Stacey Bruner, had a lightning recorded session on the impact of accurate holdings in ILL. You have to watch this lightning round. It is hysterical in an educated way. Stacey has gone, it's just amazing. I don't want to spoil the fun, but this is a really great presentation, and you all should take a look at it. It's already pre-recorded. You can just go in. It's quick and it is to the point, and shouts out to Stacey for a great presentation. So now we have a poll question. If you've pulled down your July reason for no report and exported it to Excel and then ranked it, tell us now what your #1 lending reason for no is. Sort of like the, maybe like the Oscars or something. And while you're voting, I just want to mention, we recently sent out a back to school email asking you to take a look at your policies directory to get ready for the fall season, for fall lending season. You want to go back in and take a look. If you log into your policies directory and see the last updated date, and that's on the upper right-hand corner of the policies directory, if that's more than a year old, you really need to review probably the 3 most important parts of the policies directory is your profile, your policies for borrowing and lending, and it also includes deflections, and also your contacts. You may log into the policies directory and see a contact and say, oh, that person hasn't worked here in 5 years. That's a good indication that you need to update your policies directory. And finally, I want to put out a big shout out. I didn't get to check to see of the attendees that are attending. Those express libraries, those are a new program that we started last fall. Those are our fast lenders of articles. It's called the Express program. So from the audience, I want you to raise your hand and say, I'm an Express library. Can we get a raise of hands? Excellent. Glad to see them. How is the voting going, Alena?
Yeah, I was just asking. So obviously we're the first presentation for this for this conference, and I think the committee needs a little bit of time to figure out how to show the results. So when we get those, we'll share those. And then we can go on to the next slide. I think.
Alena, I can read out the percentages.
Oh, okay, that works.
Like, sure. So the winner is with 28% is lacking. Then comes not owned, 24%. In use / on loan with 19%. Deflections, 14%. And then aging, non-circulating, policy problem, and other. And for other, we do have, sorry, I just saw here. Somebody had said, you know, we're a small library with limited material, so we don't lend.
So this is great because again.
Oh, here we go.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you.
Great.
So just to, again, these are the ones that we focused on. Not owned is again the case where you go to your catalogers and ask them to remove holdings from your collection. In use on loan, you send in a request to have real-time availability set on. And lacking is basically if you don't have local holdings or if you haven't placed your holdings in the knowledge base, that is something you can do. Access to the knowledge base is free for cataloging members. And it would be great. So it would reduce the number of times that you get requests for electronic content that you don't own, and also get electronic content for things you do own and that you can lend.
And I can pop in here too to say aging is your most common reason for no. You might think about going non-supplier for a while. Maybe that means you're getting more requests than you can handle right now. Or there's also, if you use WorldShare ILL, there's a way to turn on a notification every time you get a new lending request. So if you're at a smaller library and you're not used to logging in and checking every day, that can really help to make sure you stay on top of lending requests. And there's one library that's a policy problem. If you can figure out what the policy problem is that is behind your policy problem response, you can usually turn that into a deflection. So if you're getting a lot of requests for, say, AV materials, you can actually set up a deflection in the policies directory to deflect those so that you don't have to manually say no to all of those.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. All right, let's see what's next.
So finally, always lean on our good friends down the road at the Ohio State University. You did see I said the Ohio State University. This is from the head of ILO there, Brian Miller. In one of the previous webinars, this was one of the slides he shared. Reasons for no is his favorite statistic on OCLC. And I'm not going to read you the entire blurb, but basically he uses the reasons for no report for a number of reasons that we didn't even discuss today. So I'm not going to read it, just take a look. Make sure that you're looking at your reasons for no periodically and make changes as you see problems arise. And next. So finally, I just want to mention that we just introduced in the last 2 weeks, not this Sunday, but the past Sunday, we introduced a new feature in WorldShare ILO and Tapasa. And yes, Iliad users can log into the WorldShare ILO account to see this dashboard. It's an ILO dashboard that shows up on the home page, and it basically gives you a visual of your borrowing and lending turnaround time. For my purposes, I'm going to show you the lending turnaround time dashboard, and it allows you to see trends at a glance. One of the cool things is that it's updated on a weekly basis, so you don't have to wait till the end of the month to see how your turnaround time is going, and you can use it. So, Alena, if you scroll to the next page, I can sort of show you what the dashboard looks like. So this is the lending turnaround time. And you notice that this turnaround time is based on the time from when you as the lender received the request to when the borrowing institution updated that request to received. There are two lines, one for copies, one for loans. So you can see in this case, the loan request, the turnaround times are always going to be higher than the copy request because we're talking about books being transported across, distances, depending on the shipping service you use. It could be slower or faster. Copy requests tend to be a little bit faster, but you'll notice like in the June-ish timeframe, there's a high spike for a copy there and an even higher one right at the end of July. So that's something that you might want to take a look at. If you hover over the individual points on the dashboard, it will actually give you the actual time, turnaround time in, I'm looking at Jetty, for loans,
Days.
days, and
It's days for both.
Yeah, it's in days for both. So where your copy ones, you'll see points of days. Hopefully you won't see full days in copy requests, but you would see those for loans as well. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, so we answered a couple of questions during the this module, and if you have others, feel free to put them in the chat. We probably won't be able to answer everything today, but we will try to hit the the key questions. We'll also try to keep track and follow back. Some of them are just a little deep and require, as you could see with Tony's explanation about holdings, it can take a little bit of little time to explain some of these topics. So
we do have a question, Alena. It's is there any way that the graphic could be made smaller on the resource sharing homepage?
Jenny.
I don't think there are any plans to do that. I mean, my thinking was it takes up the same central real estate that the message board used to. The message board is still there. It's just in a different tab, and it should be below all of your requests. But I'd be interested in hearing why you'd want it to be smaller.
Okay, we can continue that in the chat probably. So don't see any other questions, but if you do have questions on this, feel free to put them in. We'll circle back at some point, and we'll go ahead and maybe let Jenny get started on talking about how to ensure your custom holdings are in good shape using statistics.
Sure. Oh, I just see one question real quick about the dashboard that I can answer very quickly. How would an ILLiad library get to the dashboard? You would log into your instance of WorldShare ILL, and you can contact OCLC support if you don't know what that is, but it's usually your institution's registry ID .share. Oh, I need to be typing it, but it's your WorldShare ILL instance that you use for other things. Like if you have cataloging, record manager, collection manager, it's the same URL. You go to the ILL tab there and you can see it. So on to custom holdings. So custom holdings groups and paths can actually get stale over time. They're one of those things that sometimes you set them up or the person who worked in your department before you set them up, or even longer than that. So it really is a good idea to revisit them on a regular basis, probably at least a couple times a year. You want to be sure that you're sending your requests to the lenders who are most likely to fill them accurately and quickly. There are tools and usage stats that you can use to look more closely at the performance of the lenders that you've been using. And if you don't currently use custom holdings paths to build your lender strings today, you can still evaluate the performance of the lenders that you've used. And then you can use some information that you find in these reports to create custom holding groups and paths based on the best performing lenders with your requests. So when you're looking to evaluate the performance of your lenders, there are several questions that statistical reports can help you answer. You can go back to the previous one, Alena. So there we go. So your usage stats will actually tell the story of your library's history with each lender and potential lender that you've tried. So the data that you can obtain there is very specific to the interactions that you have with each of those lenders. The first 2 points here might be pretty obvious data points to check. Which lenders are filling your requests versus saying no to them or deflecting them. And also how fast are they at filling your requests, their turnaround time. But it's also important to look for lenders who habitually let most or all of the requests you send to them age without responding to them. And Tony talked about looking at your own performance, but it's also important to look at if you're sending to lenders who let that happen. Because those are lenders that you certainly want to avoid. They slow down all of your requests. So maybe you have, you can also investigate deflections for your requests. So if there are lenders that are deflecting a certain type of request, maybe you've created a custom holdings path that you use for requesting a format like DVDs. It'd be good to know if some of the lenders in that custom holdings path that you use to request DVDs actually always deflect your request due to format type. So these are reports that we'll look at now, and they'll help answer all of these questions. So the outcome here is to update your custom holdings paths so that you can identify your best lenders and prioritize them. And then on the opposite side, you can identify lenders who are less effective and either deprioritize them by moving them to a custom holdings group that's ranked lower in your custom holdings path, or perhaps by removing them altogether. Why do you want to do this? Well, because you want to get your patrons their requested materials as quickly and accurately as possible. The 2 reports that are the most helpful in addressing these questions and supplying data for custom holdings updates are the lender string report and the resource sharing borrower reasons for no report. Let's look at the lender string report first, and it is actually in a slightly different area in usage stats, and as a result, it sometimes gets missed. So this report is in the group of reports under assessment tools, rather than in the main group of World Share ILL reports. So when you log into www.stats.oclc.org, you'll be in that group of OCLC World Share Interlibrary Loan reports. You'll have to click down to that assessment tools to get to this report. You can set this report to look at data going back up to 60 months, but if you've never used it before, 12 months is a good place to start. And the reason for that is if you look at too much historical data, your results might get skewed. For example, if you have a library that you interact with and they were just starting out with lending, say 2 years ago, maybe they had initially poor turnaround time while they were getting their staff trained. But in the past 6 months, they've been lightning fast. And if you were to look at 24 months or more of data with your relationship with that library, you might miss discovering that that library is a great lender for you today. If you want to go through this routine more than once a year, you could do it every 6 months or every 3 months. You can set this reporting period here under the month section to look at the amount of time that's passed since you last looked at this report. And then you can update it and it'll generate the report. You can export it to Excel, however you want to look at it. So at the bottom here, you can see the fields in this lender string report. This report shows you how many times each potential lender was included in a lender string you built and how they responded to your request that you sent to them. What was their fill rate with your requests? What was their time to respond to your requests? This report has separate data for copy requests and original requests, which means loan requests. Those are requests for returnable items. So it's very helpful that these 2 things are broken out because your best lenders for loans might be different than your best suppliers for copies. And this report lets you identify good candidates for A+ lenders for each copies and loans. And so that allows you to use this tool to create multiple custom holdings groups to be used for copy or loan requesting separately. So while you can view and filter this data on the screen in OCLC usage statistics, this report has a lot of helpful information. So I like to filter and sort it quite a bit to make the most use of it, particularly if you only run it once or twice a year and you have a large amount of data to review. So for that reason, I recommend exporting the report to Excel. You can see the link to export the data near the top right of the screen in that purple box. Then you can really capitalize on the filters and the sorting features that are available in Excel to play with the data. And here you can also see what the report looks like once it has been exported to Excel with just the data headers there. Remember that section that says original means loan requests. You'll see the same fields for each type of request repeated. There'll be the loan requests and then the copy request fields. So this is one recommended way to use this report. You can look first at, say, loan requests and then replicate the procedure with copy data. If you decide that what you want to prioritize lenders by is fill rate, you could decide what would constitute a really strong fill rate to you, and then filter that percentage filled column that's on the report to that number and above using number filters in Excel. Those are libraries that would have good fill rates on your requests, but you don't have to stop there because you can keep filtering some more. So if you've done that and you have a lot of lenders with a good fill rate for your requests, you may also want to further filter the report by time to respond. So in this report, time to respond is listed in days, and that indicates the amount of time it took a lender to respond to your request. It's the time elapsed between when your request was first assigned to their symbol and when they responded. That can mean how long it took them to mark your request shipped for the times they filled the request, as well as how long it took them to say no when they couldn't fill the request. So this number takes into account how fast a lender is both when they can and when they cannot supply your request, and that's important. If you have a threshold turnaround time below which you feel is too long, you can filter the data to a time to respond of that time and below. And then that resulting list of symbols could be used to create a new custom holdings group for loan requests. So the fast libraries. You could put that custom holdings group first in your custom holdings path for loan requests, because those are your evidence-based, very best lenders over the past year. And then you can do the same procedure for copy requesting data from this report. You would use the filters in the copy section of the report and use your results there to create your best copy suppliers and create a new custom holdings group for those lenders, and make that custom holdings group first in your custom holdings path used for copy requests. So you could use the same procedure in the other direction as well. You could start by filtering lenders by time to respond first, and then filter to fill rate. If speed of filling requests is paramount to you, that might be the way your library decides to use this data. Show you some examples on the next slide. You could also use this report the other way to identify lenders that you want to remove from your custom holdings groups due to less optimal performance, we'll say. Maybe they take too long to respond, or you send them a lot of requests, but they fill none of them. So using the same exported Excel file, you can filter now on the percentage unfilled column, which also looks at loans and copies separately. You could define the maximum unfilled rate you would accept, and then filter the percentage unfilled column to that number and above. So here I looked for libraries with a percentage unfilled for my requests of 80% or more. Those would be the lenders that have really low fill rates. You can then filter further by their time to respond so that you can identify lenders with low fill rates who are also really slow. Those are the ones that you'd want to avoid. So here I filtered from high to low time to respond. Lenders with low fill rates and high time to respond could be removed from your custom holdings groups, in this case for copies. You can see the libraries in the blue rectangle are the ones I'd consider either removing or deprioritizing. And I'm not shaming anyone here. Those are all OCLC test symbols. No real libraries being shamed today. So remember, this example is for copy requests. And once you finish doing this, you'd remove your filters from the copy side and then do the same for the original loans data to the left to identify the lower performing lenders for loans. you could then consider removing or deprioritizing those from the custom holding groups you use when requesting loans. So our recommendation would be to use this report at least once a year, maybe semi-annually, but probably not more frequently than that. Go to the next slide. If you want to dig deeper into why lenders say no to your requests, the borrower reasons for no report is a really great place to look. And because there is so much data in this report, including all the bibliographic data about each of the requests that you sent, it is only available to run with a month's worth of data at a time. So it's something to keep in mind. So in this report, you can identify why lenders aren't filling your requests. Tony talked quite a bit about the lender version of this report to analyze why your library couldn't supply items. But this report lets you look at why lenders that you sent requests to didn't fill your requests. The lender string report will help you identify the best and not so best lenders based on fill rate, turnaround time. But you can then check this reasons for no report monthly to see why exactly lenders that you've added to your lender string are not filling your requests, and look for patterns that might emerge. So one example is that you can look at deflections. If a lender is regularly deflecting your requests because of a max cost issue or due to material format, you'll want to adjust your custom holdings groups to remove those lenders when placing requests where you either don't want to pay or where you need to request a special format item like AV or an ebook. And after reviewing this report, you'll see why it's so important when you're acting as a lender to provide a reason for no when you can't fill a request. Some of you saw on your reasons for no, some no other or no unspecified responses. And that means that the lender just said no, but didn't also select a reason for no, or a cancellation reason in Iliad lingo. So you will probably see as you start looking at this report, if you get a lot of unspecified reasons for no, it's not at all helpful to you as a borrower trying to figure out how to best interact with lenders. But perhaps the most bang for the buck reason to use this report is yet to come. On the next slide. We are all concerned with getting materials to our patrons as quickly as possible and providing the best service that we can. So you might wonder about that. Is there anything slowing down your requests? Of course, one reason why requests sometimes move slowly through the system is because they have landed with what we will call a non-responsive lender. You can use the resource sharing borrower reasons for no report to help you investigate that. So in this case, we'll look for non-responsive lenders, and those are lenders who allowed your requests simply to age. These libraries didn't fill your requests, but they also didn't respond no to them. Your requests stayed in their lending queue for their full days to respond. For most libraries, they have that set at 4 days, but it can be set to as high as 20 days. Either way, that's too long for a request to sit. You can export this report to Excel and sort by the reason for no. And here, when you do this, you're looking for all of the reasons associated with aging. And there are 4 of them. There's age to next lender, age to unfilled. That happens if you're the last lender. Age to expired. That means that the request need by date passed while it was assigned to you. And age to the same lender. That means someone puts your lender string, your symbol in the lender string twice in a row, which is a terrible idea. More about that later. Actually, more about that right now. So we don't recommend doing that, entering a lender symbol twice in a row or more, because lenders now have the ability to set their days to respond according to the amount of time that they need to review requests and retrieve items. There are, of course, a few exceptions to that, like if you use the Library of Congress as a lender of last resort, sometimes you actually do have to put them in multiple times. But in normal cases, if you put a symbol in more than once in a row and you run into a lender who lets requests age, and they're one of the ones that you added their symbol more than once, that means you've just doubled or tripled the amount of time your request simply got stuck without moving. So something to think about. So before I mentioned deflections, unlike lenders who let requests age without responding, lenders who have deflections set up don't slow down your request at all. A well-configured deflection policy will prevent lenders from having to manually review and eventually respond no to requests for items that their local policies won't allow them to fill. It keeps requests flowing in the system. And the good news is, if your library uses automation to build a lender string, you won't have to worry about lender deflection at all, because automation examines deflection scenarios before even building the lender string. And it never wastes a spot in the lender string on a lender who would deflect. But if you don't have fully automated borrowing, you're likely to see lender deflections in your borrower reasons for no report. And that's helpful in a few ways. So first, the type of deflection is recorded here. If you see a deflection for format type, that means that the lender has a deflection based on material format. So that's important to know, because if you have a custom holdings path that you use to request specific item type, like ebooks or DVDs or theses or dissertations, and then you see the same lenders deflecting with auto deflection format type repeatedly, you know that you shouldn't bother using that lender to request those specific formats, as your requests will never be successful with them. You can go to the next slide. That's just a, oh, I think we missed one. Is there one back? There we go. So that's just one way deflection information is helpful, and there are more. You might first want to look at deflections based on cost. So if you have a custom holdings path made up of what you assume to be free lenders, and you send requests with your max cost of what you're willing to pay set to 0, and then you see a deflection from one of those lenders due to cost, it'll say cost exceeds limit, you should remove them from any custom holdings group that you use to identify free lenders, because they are no longer a free lender. Those deflections show up as cost exceeds limit, shown here in the red box. It's a little misleading because that is actually a deflection, or it can be. So those reflect lenders who aren't going to lend to you for free. And finally, this was a question that was raised on the ILL Facebook group a couple of months ago. Someone asked if they could find out if a lender was deflecting their requests because they had found their way into that lender's bad borrower custom holdings group. So if you're not familiar with that practice, as a lender, you can set up deflections from all libraries based on their membership in either a profiled group or a custom holdings group that you create. Many lenders will identify bad borrowers who habitually return items late or damaged, or lose items frequently, requiring time-intensive billing. What if you're someone's bad borrower? And the purple boxes here are two related examples. First, there's deflection custom group. That means the lender has created their own custom holdings group of libraries to whom they will not lend. If you see this reason for no, you're in that lender's custom group of libraries to whom they will not lend. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad borrower, because they can create a custom holdings group and use it in deflection for multiple reasons. But it does mean that this lender won't supply to you for whatever reason. Similarly, if you see auto deflection profile group, that means you're in a profiled group to whom the lender will not supply. That could mean that the lender only supplies to a specific profiled group that represents libraries in their state or their local consortium, and then deflects requests from all other libraries outside of the groups that they want to work with. Or it could mean the lender gets a lot of requests from libraries in your profiled group. Some libraries who charge will deflect all requests from Elvis libraries. It saves them time because they know they don't want to supply to libraries in that group for whatever reason. And then they don't have to worry about seeing the requests and holding them up when they will inevitably say no. But either way, if you see deflections for these reasons, it means these lenders are likely not going to fill requests for you for the type of item that you submitted. Go to the next slide. So now that we have identified some lenders who might not be optimal suppliers for your requests, you may decide you want to remove some of them from the custom holdings groups that you have. Of course, once you've found lenders who say they allow your request to age, you'll want to see if that's a pattern first. Similarly, if the same lenders are deflecting your requests for reasons of format, cost exceeds limit, or group membership, make sure that's happening consistently before you decide to remove them. When it comes to aging, of course, everyone has some problems with that at times. Maybe the lender had an unexpected absence or a sudden increase in lending request volume or a local closure, and they forgot to set themselves to non-supplier. However, for some lenders, non-responsiveness is the norm. So if you submit multiple requests to a lender over several months, and that lender lets all or most of the requests you send them age, then you definitely would want to remove them from your custom holdings group so that you don't build lender strings, either manually by filtering to the custom holdings path or through automation that include those non-responsive lenders. So once you've identified lenders to remove, you'll log into service configuration and go to the WorldShare ILL section on the left menu. From there, access the custom holdings group page. You can search by symbol on that screen to identify all of the custom holdings groups you have that include the lender you wish to remove. So you can search by one symbol at a time, and it'll give you a list of all of the custom holdings groups you have and show you a yes or a no to indicate if that particular symbol is in each of those groups. So you'll view each custom holdings group then that you need to edit by selecting it in the drop-down menu of custom holdings groups names at the top of the screen. And then you can use the Add Edit Symbols button at the bottom to open a new window. And that window will have all of the symbols listed in that group in alphabetical order, which makes it easy to find the symbol to remove. Find it, delete it, and then click Update Symbols. And be sure to save your custom holdings group changes. The good news here, like Tony talked about earlier, is that our team's been regularly reviewing patterns of non-responsiveness among lenders. Whenever we see a lender who has let 100% of their requests age over a period of time, usually at least 6 months, we'll set them to non-supplier. This has dramatically cut back on the number of requests allowed to age system-wide. And this is a review that we're planning to continue. And the good news is that each time we do it, and we do it every month, we see fewer and fewer lenders who need to be set to non-suppliers. So the problem is gradually being solved. So just to review, no matter what method you use to evaluate, whether it's using that lender string report and looking for lenders with high fill rates, or looking for lenders on that report with fast turnaround time, or making sure you remove anyone who lets your request age or is deflecting your requests all the time, the end goal is always to be able to update your custom holdings groups to keep them in good shape. You'd want to remove symbols monthly or quarterly for libraries that always deflect by a format type or a service type. Look at what you were requesting that was deflected. That's important. If you see a service type deflection, that means the library is deflecting either all copy requests or all loan requests. It's another good indicator not to send them that type of request. And any aging reasons, if they happen repeatedly, means that lender is non-responsive. So I think we have a poll question that you can this time just answer in chat. We're hoping that you plan to take some action. What do you think you plan to do after learning more about these reports? Looking for which libraries are your most frequent lenders, looking at fill rates and turnaround times, aging and deflections, creating a new custom holding group and path, updating existing custom holdings groups, or something else. I like the F, all of the above response I just saw. Seen lots of B's, that's great.
Yeah, thanks everybody for answering. F fits the bill.
I think that brings us to questions.
Yes, and if you, yes, questions here, and also as you're starting to dig into this stuff on your own time, please reach out to OCLC support. They can help with all of this kind of stuff, and they can also get in touch with us when needed. So
we did have a question earlier on that said, do these stats reflect just items going through WorldShare, or do they include ALA requests also? Trying to see the usefulness of this compared to ILLiad stats.
So if it's an ALA manual form and it's not coming into WorldShare, then your WorldShare stats won't include it. Your ILLiad stats would if you've got one of those lending pages where non-OCLC members can use to fill out and place a request. Another difference between OCLC usage stats and ILLiad usage stats is that sometimes ILLiad libraries will think that their lending fill rates are a lot higher than they really are, because in OCLC usage stats, we see all the deflections, and the ILLiad usage stats don't count the deflections because those requests get deflected before they ever get downloaded to ILLiad.
Thanks, Jenny. The next question is there a webinar on how to work through custom holdings groups we can go through at a later date?
That's in our workshop series, right, Jenny?
There is, yes, there's lots of information there. I feel like I went through it super fast here, and that spends a whole hour going over the finer points of it.
Yeah, and I'll give that URL again. I'll throw it in the chat, but those workshops are in the OCLC Community Center on the events page.
And is there a way to run a report of serials that you have filled for other libraries?
Yes, you could look at your, I think we're going to talk about the journal titles report, but that's borrowing. Tony, do you want to pop in here?
Well, I mean, you could take a look at the overarching borrower resource sharing report. Again, that has a lot of data in it.
Well, it'd be lender in this case. You're the lender filling the request.
So then you would go to the lender resource sharing report, and that you can sort that based off of copy versus loan, and take a look at what you're lending as far as serials are concerned.
In that report, you can download 1 month of data at a time, as it does have all of that bib data in it. So you can download it, save it off, change the name of it when you save it to the month and year, because what happens is if you download consecutive months, it'll keep the downloaded temporary file saves with the same name. So it can overwrite things. So download, save it with a month and a year, download the next one, and then you can put them together if you want to.
Thank you. Are the auto-deflected requests counted in other reports, such as the lending activity overview report?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, that's for WorldShare IL of Tapasa. As Jenny mentioned, since ILLiad never sees the request, their stats are going to be higher.
There's oh, go ahead.
For just clarifying that, ILLiad libraries will see those deflections in OCLC usage stats. They just won't see them in ILLiad stats.
ILLiad stats, right. And I'll just, I want to acknowledge everybody that's talking about, you know, this is it is a labor intensive process. And we are, you know, have plans in the works to help this in the future. Even some of the things that we've put in place recently, hopefully are helping so that you don't have to do this as often. But we wanted to show you how to use your stats to do these things. And Jenny, I don't know if you want to speak to, is there anything that on the near-term roadmap that might help make these things faster or less needed?
Wow, Alena, that's like the perfect segue into the next section, which is on automation stats. Using automation is really the best way to get around needing to do like a really thorough, consistent review of your custom holdings groups and paths. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to review them at all, but because automation uses smart lender strings, it does a lot of the work for you. And so I'll talk about that in the next section.
Okay.
And finally, is there a glossary for terms mentioned? Age to expired, age to unfilled, etc.?
I think in our help, there is in a few places. There's help for the usage statistics reports for the WorldShare Interlibrary Loan reports. That's what you can look for in help.oclc.org. And it does break down what those reasons for no mean and what those objects in those reports are.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe after the session, we can post in the event Moby chat some links to some helpful documentation too.
Yeah, I was going to also suggest anytime you're in the help.oclc.org, just try searching on that term you might even put that term in quotes to bring up the best hits on that, and hopefully you'll get a definition pretty quickly. But yeah, I think that's a great idea for us to go through maybe this presentation and pull the definitions and share those. That would be a
There's
good addition.
also brief help in the actual stats report page itself. If you go up, I think it's on the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to help, and it will just basically give you very, very basic information about what each of the reports provides.
So that's when you're in this, on the report itself, or just
On the stats main page,
Just-
in the report
okay.
itself, up in the corner. So if you're looking at, you'll see help, and
okay.
it will give you that information.
Thank
Oh,
you,
good.
Stacey.
Stacey's
Thank you, Stacey. I, on the side, told Stacey, thank you for helping us. We should have thought to have one more person from OCLC watching the chat, so I appreciate her help. All right, well, everybody's good. We'll go ahead and Jenny will talk about some how to improve your automations with using statistics.
Yes, because like we just heard and like you just asked, that might sound like a lot of work to review and update your custom holdings groups and paths on a regular basis. But there really is hope. While some review and tweaking is always recommended, the good news is that if your library starts using automation to send borrowing requests directly to lenders, or even just to build the lender strings, you'll likely need to do less review of your custom holdings, because with automation, you get smart lender strings. What are smart lender strings? Well, lender strings that are built in automation with configuration that you create in the automated request manager will be sorted by turnaround time within each of the custom holding groups in your custom holdings path. They will also remove libraries who would deflect before the lender string even gets built. They will not add libraries with local holdings records or KB holdings that indicate they do not have access to the requested date that you need. And they will not add libraries with licenses on e-serials that prevent them from supplying articles from those titles via ILL. So what does that mean for custom holdings? Well, if you have a sufficiently large amount of libraries in your custom holdings path, automation can do a better job of building a lender string than you can. That sounds blunt. I'm not trying to judge anyone here, because that's purely because automation has access to more information and it's faster, particularly for copy requests, where it doesn't matter where a library is geographically located, because copy requests are sent electronically and they don't need to go through the mail. It makes sense when you're requesting copies to create one giant custom holdings group and make that the only group in your path. So you might just create one based on, these lenders are all free, I don't pay for copies, I'm just going to put Elvis as the first group in my custom holdings path. What that does is then it lets automation do the rest to find the fastest lender within that group who won't deflect, has the needed issue, and a license to permit supplying via ILL. And if you start using automation, you'll probably want to see how that's working. And of course, stats can help with that. So as you assess your automations, you'll want to be able to answer some questions like these. Which requests are even going through automation? Which ones aren't? Why aren't the ones that aren't matching not matching? Was that expected? And for requests going through automation and having automation send them out to lenders unmediated, are those requests getting filled more quickly and by lenders earlier in the lender string? So the outcome of having this information is to be able to make changes to your automations or create some. You can either edit existing ones or create new ones to capture more requests so that they too get the smart lender strings and save staff time and get items to your patrons more quickly. Also, since automation makes use of custom holdings paths that you designate, you can also review the performance of your custom holdings path by reviewing your automations. So that can sort of be a canary in the coal mine of sorts. If requests that had automation build a lender string are not getting filled more quickly, it points to problems with your custom holdings path, which may lead you to embark upon a custom holdings stats review like we just discussed. So a quick aside, when we talk about automation, we're talking about what you set up in the automated request manager. And if you're a WorldShare ILL, a TAPASA, or an ILLiad library, you all have access to this. If you're an ILLiad library, you'll need to set up some routing rules on the ILLiad side to get requests into automation. So requests that are produced by automations that you set up here are the only way to get those smart lender strings I was talking about. You can find Automated Request Manager and Service Configuration in the WorldShare ILL section. And if your institution had any direct request profiles, they would have migrated here as well. You can see all the automation set up for your institution under the main automation section, which you see in the purple box. You can go to the next slide. Under that main automation section, you'll note that only one automation can be applied to a request. If multiple automations were to match, the system will decide which automation to use based on each matching automation's priority, and you can set that priority yourself. Matching automation with highest priority, as expressed by the lowest number, will be applied to your request. So the system examines all incoming new borrowing requests and looks for all automations that match, and then breaks the tie based on priority. But remember, only one automation is applied, not multiple. So that helps you have better control over what the system's doing to your requests. So let's try to read this first automation here. From the screenshot I shared earlier, you could see where these were set up. And if your library didn't have any automation set up, you would also see a message here that says, you don't have any automations, but you should set some up. But this automation is saying that the sendbooks automation, you can name it whatever you want, as long as you use alphanumeric characters. And you can see that it is matching on all book requests that were published between 2 and 99 years ago. And if your institution holds it, you can move it to document delivery automatically. The system will do that. Otherwise, if you don't own it, it will send the request directly to lenders in your test institution's custom holdings path, as long as at least one of those libraries owns it. And it will also apply a constant data record called loan, no IFM. So why am I going into automation? Why is this important for stats? Well, understanding what your automation is actually doing, whereas it might have been less clear in the old direct request interface, is really vital when you review your stats and discover why a request that you would want to go out unmediated to lenders did not do so. So knowing where and how to read your automation so that you can make changes as needed is really important, especially if your library had really old direct request profiles that no one has reviewed in years. Good news, they're easier to understand now and way easier to edit, but back to the stats. So let's go to the next slide. So to help answer questions about automation, starting with how many and which requests went through automation, we can return to our friend, the borrower resource sharing stats report we talked about in the beginning, I think. This is a report that has so much data, just like the lender resource sharing stats report, it has every bibliographic piece of information in it. So with this report, you can see information about the characteristics of requests that went through automation. Most relevant on this report are the 2 direct request labeled fields. There's direct request unmediated and direct request mediated. You'll see Ys and Ns for each request in each of those columns. So what does that mean exactly? Well, requests that had some automation processing but were not sent out unmediated to lenders will display N for direct request unmediated and Y for direct request mediated. So this is the case sometimes, even if you don't have any automation set up. If your library uses TAPASA, all requests that go through your user portal will display as at least direct request mediated. Similarly, if you use WorldShare ILL and your patrons place requests via WorldCat Discovery or First Search, you'll see requests showing as direct request mediated, even if you don't have any automations in place. That's because these processes send requests through what we call profiling, which is the first step in automation. In profiling, the request is examined to find a best matching bibliographic record in WorldCat. The request then gets automatically updated with additional bibliographic information from the selected WorldCat record, which makes it easier for you to fill the request. Requests that had automation actually send the request directly to lenders will display a Y in the direct request unmediated column and an N in the direct request mediated column. That means automation did everything from performing a bibliographic match to applying constant data and building a smart lender string and sending immediately to lenders without you doing anything. So if you have automation set up to send requests to lenders and you see some or many requests with ends in the unmediated column of this report, that means you'll want to examine your automations and the characteristics of the request to determine why they're not matching. Could you edit your existing automation to make it more broad and therefore apply to more requests? Especially if you realize you would perform the same actions with the requests that aren't matching. You would use the same constant data, send to the same custom holdings path as your automation dictates. Or is your automation an old one that maybe migrated from the old interface and you haven't looked at it in a while? Does that automation still make sense? The one frequent problem that I've seen a lot when I've reviewed automations for libraries when we do our tune-ups is that they specific. So in the old interface with direct request, it was really difficult to configure. And sometimes it made it look like you needed to pick something for every field. One thing that I see a lot is that users select, for example, every language with the intent that that means no matter what the language, I want this one to match. However, that means that there must be a language in the request for it to match. If there isn't one, and that certainly is the case on a lot of requests, the automation won't match those requests. Instead, if you want the automation to match on requests for materials in any language, don't specify a language at all as a match criterion. Leaving it out means your automation will match requests in all languages. Go to the next slide. So once automation's up and running, you can also evaluate if the lender strings you're building in automation are getting to a lender who can fill your request sooner in the lender string. So this is helpful to use the position in the lender string column. This tells you the position for the successful lender, the one who filled each request. You can actually download this report to Excel as well and filter it to look at an average position in the lender string for requests that went through automation, so that direct request unmediated would be Y, versus those that did not. If automated requests are not getting filled sooner, that's a good sign that you'll want to make some adjustments to your custom holdings paths. And I think that brings us to questions. I like how Alena put the "you complete me" slide on here because I love automation so much. That's probably why she did it.
I tried to make them somewhat relevant. I was gonna, Jenny, we did have a question about automations, and this is a myth that I think we want to bust across the board to everyone. There's a misconception sometimes that automations are only available for Tapasa or Iliad users. It is available to anybody on the OCLC network. So your WorldShare ILL users out there, you can set up automations. And in fact, we've had a couple of webinars recently where we've had our, our WorldShare ILL users tell how they're using automations. And Jenny, maybe this is a plug for the panel on Friday.
Yes, one of the presenters at my automation panel on Friday, it's a Q&A panel where I'll introduce them and ask them some questions. One of our panelists works at a public library that does pretty high volume, and she routes all of her requests through direct request, well, automated request manager. And the way she does it, because we see this a lot with WorldShare ILL libraries, maybe you don't allow your patrons to discover and place their own requests. So maybe you don't use WorldCat Discovery with your users, or maybe you don't use First Search. Maybe your users fill out a form on your website and then your ILL staff has to manually enter that, or they come to the reference desk or a paper form or something. So even if that's the way that your requests get into the system, there is a button in the WorldShare ILL interface at the top of a borrowing request where it says send to lenders. It's a drop-down menu, and if you click it to expand it, you'll see send to automation. And if you click send to automation, it'll send and process through the automations that you have set up. And that's a great way to get it to build the lender string and send it to lenders. So it's actually really fast. Stacey, who's on the line, and I needed to implement actually the Columbus Metropolitan Library on Tapasa really quickly. They had so many requests in their backlog that needed to be manually entered. So we helped them manually enter them. But then because we were manually entering them, we wanted to get them automation and smart lender string. So we just got the information in and then clicked send to automation, send to automation. It just sent all the requests out to lenders super fast. And that's what Laura Barber, who's one of our panelists on Friday, does with her requests.
Wrong direction. Didn't see anything else coming in through the chat, but if you do have any questions here, today we were intending on just, again, talking about how statistics can inform how well your automations are going. And if you want to know more about automations, we do have the workshop in our series on automation specifically, and also I don't know if anybody, maybe Stacey can dig up the links for the panels that we've had back in June, I think it was, with talking about some of this stuff, but also, I guess that was more about fast blenders and things like that. But please do, if you can stick around until the end of the conference on Friday, please do come to the automation panel where we talk a lot more about this. Okay.
All right. So I'll
Another
fun module.
Another fun topic.
So I'll completely switch gears for this one. And this is probably one of the most frequent requests we get about usage stats, which reports help me with collection development. This part's pretty straightforward. It's just once you're aware of the right tools to use, then it's pretty easy to use them. So just want to kind of introduce them to you today. You can go to the next slide. So what sorts of questions can you answer about collection development? Well, usage stats definitely help you with all of these. Titles, subject areas, publishers that are most frequently requested by your users. Since some of the resource sharing reports and usage stats have every piece of bid data in them, it's easy to get this information from them. Then, of course, once you have that information, in this case, we'll use, again, the borrower resource sharing stats report. You can share it with your collection development staff. This report lets you export and sort information in whatever way is most meaningful to your library. So as you probably know, ILL is a great source of information about what your library's patrons really want. It can be a good source of patron-driven acquisition information. You might wonder, how exactly do I use ILL stats for that? You may have been asked which subject areas are most highly represented in the materials that your library borrows or requests. So in this case, to answer those questions, the borrower resource sharing stats report is extremely helpful. This report has a ton of data in it. Tony calls this one, my eyes glaze over, because there's so much data in it. Isn't that right, Tony? The MIGO report. So it is available as a result with 1 month's worth of data at a time because of that. And I would highly recommend exporting it to Excel so that you can sort and filter and edit it. So most helpful in this report for answering the questions at hand are the columns that cover the call number classification of requested materials. These call numbers come from the WorldCat record. So if there is an LC, a DEWI, or a National Library of Medicine call number, they'll be included in this report. That's helpful because whether you use Library of Congress or DEWI at your library, you'll find helpful information here. And of course, if it's a medical item, you all likely to see the NLM information as well. So once you export this file, you can sort it by the call number that your library uses. So in this example, I sorted this data by Library of Congress call number. You can then separate the file and share info with appropriate collection development specialists or generate reports about subject areas of ILL requests per month. So when you send your subject specialist their list, you can also include all of the ISBN or ISSNs associated with the title, which makes it easier to order if that's what they choose to do, along with title, author, data publication format, and OCLC number. You can also include publisher information. It's in the imprint column. That can be especially useful when you're looking at potential e-journal collections or packages for purchase or subscription. You can group them together by sorting by imprint. Sorting this report by call number, like you see here, also helps make it easy to spot when the same title is requested more than once in a month. Here, this is a book request. This might lead you to explore why this title is suddenly popular. So beyond just collection development, you might dig into, is this required reading for a course? Is that faculty member likely to request the same text in the future? Does it reflect a new area of concentration at your institution? Is it one you should try to support? So you might recommend a purchase. So all sorts of information you can glean from this. And if you work at a public library, you might use this report to spot holes in your collection. If your patrons are using ILL to request a popular title or a newly published title, because you'll have publication years in here too, and assuming you aren't letting them do that in lieu of placing a hold on your local copies, you may wish to purchase those items for your collection. So this can help you see what your patrons are really interested in reading right now. You might also want to have a quick glance at just serial titles that you've requested from in the past year. So for that, the Journal Titles Borrowed report, which is in the assessment tools area, just like the lender string report was, you can run that report with up to 60 months of data at a time. So it can help you quickly see requesting patterns across time. You can export this file to Excel as well and order the list of titles by times requested. That lets you quickly spot titles you might want to consider subscribing to, or at least exploring subscription pricing or inclusion in various eJournal packages. Now, this does not include the date of the article that you requested, so you couldn't really use this as a copyright review, but you can at least see quickly which journal titles you're borrowing from quite a bit. Which brings us to another poll question. If you had a chance to download your borrower resource sharing stats report for the last month and you sorted by call number or title, is there any title that was requested more than once? Is there a popular title that your users are requesting? Or is there anything surprising or interesting that your users are requesting? You can put that in chat if you'd like to share. If you would not like to share, that's fine as well. Journal of Marketing Education, my ILL department, when I worked in ILL, we requested that all the time as well. That's an expensive journal, which is probably why you get a lot of ILL requests. Lots of journal titles and the most requested. Tony used to send around a list of most frequently requested titles on the network.
I was
I
just
still
going to
do.
say that.
Send it every month.
On the aggregate, but you know, it's interesting to see what individual libraries.
In fact, the top monograph requested on OCLC in July of 21 was the last thing he told me, a novel.
All right, well, keep putting your answers in there, or maybe some of you are off looking at your report to see if you can identify your number one or something that's interesting.
There is one question in the Q&A that I will ask Tony. So these stats, like journal titles, are only focusing on requests that went to OCLC libraries, correct? We also fill and lend via DocLine, and that info is not collected, correct?
Correct. The only stats that we count are the ones that go through our network. But that does include ILLiad, and I know some ILLiad libraries think that their stats don't come through our usage stats, but they do, as you can see from Brian Miller, who uses the Reason for No report.
All right, are we good to move along?
I think so.
All right, so did I forget to put this up here for questions? I guess I did.
Yeah.
So I think of stats as help me help you. The stats are there for you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the bonus content or bonus module that we wanted to make sure we provided. We know not everybody charges for ILL or pays for ILL items, but we wanted to share where you could get some information on that. Whoops. Okay, so the goals here, when you're looking at your IFM charges, are to you want to make sure that you're understanding what you're charging other people, or the what other libraries are charging you and how much. We've had, and Tony can attest, we've had some libraries contact us because they were paying out a lot more than they were getting in. And that's sort of Tony's specialty. He loves to dive into that and figure out what is going on. And generally we find there's inconsistencies, or people just aren't really aware of what they are charging and paying. So we, there's a couple of reports that you can use for this, and I did list those in the pre-work. So there's the ILL fee management or IFM reports, and there's one for borrowing and one for lending. And then you can use the, is it both the borrower and the lender resource sharing? Yeah, you have to use both of those, the resource sharing stats reports as well. And we have a clip available to you. I don't know, I'll try to copy and paste this out of here after I finish presenting so you can have it in the chat. But it's just a clip from a previous stats workshop that where Jenny and Tony go through the process of how you use those reports. And then again, the idea is that we want to get you, if you're having issues in this area, consistently charging and paying the expected amounts. And you do that with a combination of custom holdings, groups and paths, and custom holdings groups and constant data. And I think, of course, Tony's been able to help everyone he's worked with work towards being cost neutral. And some can get to the point where they're generating a small revenue. So please take a look at that recording. And again, I'll get that link into the chat here when I get a chance. And otherwise you can, if you really dig into that and start to get stuck, do reach out to OCLC support and they can get in touch with us to give you some assistance. And so I wanted to, I've lost my place in my notes here, so let me get back on track here a second. Okay. To wrap up, let's just talk about some of the takeaways. So we have collected everything from today into a one-page checklist for you. And that checklist is out on the EventMobi, the description page for this workshop. It's there for you to download. So you can go get that, use that checklist. Even if you go back through this recording later, you could kind of go through and mark off and the sections that you're interested in completing. And if you use all those tips, you know, that's the idea, is that you get in this process of tracking and using the data to continuously improve your ILL service. And here's the reminder, we talked a lot of times about this workshop series, and if you need to brush up, or even if you're just starting out in some of these topics, this is one of the best places to go. Again, you can sign into the OCLC community. oc.lc/community is the short URL. Sign in with your WorldShare credentials or your Tapasa credentials, and then go to the events page. And all 5 parts of the series are there together. Even that stats workshop, it was organized a little bit differently, but it has a lot of the same content as today's workshop. And there's also, we mentioned our documentation site, help.oclc.org, or the short URL oc.lc/help. So whenever you need to look up a term or get some details on a report, you can go out here. And I know Stacey and Tony put the longer URLs directly to those topics in the chat as well. So did we get any more questions entered?
And we have one. And before I get to that, I just want to mention that we will have the door prize picture coming up after the question, so you didn't miss it. We didn't forget. We're just about to get there. But the question is there a report that reviews knowledge-based collections used when lending? Or do we need to review journal titles in the lending report and manually figure that out? Trying to figure out how often we are utilizing certain databases for ILL.
That is a really good question. It's got my mind whirling on there.
I think I'd have to dig into that. I don't know if usage statistics can answer that, or if there's a tool that the knowledge base through Collection Manager might provide as well.
It may be a combination of a knowledge base report plus usage stat reports to give you a sense of that. Jenny and I will take a look at it and get back to you.
We like a stats challenge.
We do have, after this session, if you guys do want to continue any conversation on stats in EventMobi, there's a chat. Many of you saw it beforehand, that we can, continue to answer questions throughout the week. So feel free to use that chat and we'll try to keep an eye on it. And if we come up with some answers like this, the question that was just asked, we'll post it there so everybody can see. If there were any links or anything, I know I haven't gotten the recording link to you yet for the ILL fee management. Or did
Stacey
someone
put it
in here?
Stacey put it in there. Yep.
Thank you, Stacey. When I'm in presenter mode, it's really hard for me to go grab URLs, even though they're on my screen. Again, we I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I know. Were there any links or URLs that anybody would like to have before we wrap up any further? We do have more time for questions, so if there's anything that you wanted to dig in on, I think we can do that now. I will just show the very last meme for the day. Everyone wants to say it together now. The human head weighs 8 pounds. That kid was so cute.
Alena, I have a question for you. I'd like to know if anybody wants to fess up for to see who has the obsession with Jerry Maguire. Is that you?
So it was organic. Last year, well, I shouldn't. It was late last fall when we last did a stats workshop. We were on the show me the money theme, and I don't know how, but when
it was because I threw in as a joke. I threw in a show me the money meme onto one of my slides to see if our marketing team would slap my hand, and they didn't. So we just went with it and it grew from there.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Well, the other weird connection though was, at least for me, I had forgotten all about that meme being in that slide deck. And then when we were coming up with titles for this, something catchy for this one, someone threw out, "Oh, you had me at stats." And we were like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty clever." So we threw that in there, and it wasn't until, I don't know, several months later, because when we started putting together the slides for this, I was like, "Oh, there's 2 Jerry Maguire references here." And so then, I don't know, the last couple of days I just went crazy with memes. So
I just had to know. Thank you.
Yes, so that's a very good question. It was coincidental. I was like, wait, we already had a Jerry Maguire thing in here. Now we're titling it Jerry Maguire.
Well, we have a comment here that says, I sometimes get a response that my OCLC World Share request was turned down / deflected because I did not provide bib info in my request, such as volume and issue number, but in fact, that's not correct. Any guesses as to what's going on there?
I'm trying to think what the deflection was that she saw or they saw.
It wouldn't normally be a deflection. That sounds more like a conditional, like someone put in that they're, missing bib data or bib data incomplete to give you a chance to update it.
Okay.
And that's something that the system doesn't do automatically. That's something that individual lenders would do. I'm not sure why they weren't seeing it. There are article fields in the request for copy requests that you would use to fill in that information.
Thank you, Carl, for throwing in your theme of elementary my dear data. That's another good one.
Well, maybe we can get back to this user too about exactly what's going on. If they want to contact us, we'll be happy to investigate.
Yeah, it helps if we have a request ID. We can dig into it, exactly what happened on that. You can always, when you have questions like that, send it into OCLC support, making sure you have the request ID and you know, so I think sometimes it's helpful for them to know exactly when that request was sent through. And you can, and you know, we dig into stuff like that all the time because we don't want you to be frustrated. Here's another good one. Is there a way to block people from other countries?
Actually, that is something that you can do. Basically, I would go into the policies directory and search for libraries in Denmark. So you can search by countries and you'll get a list of the Danish OCLC libraries.
Do you want me to share my screen and just do it?
Sure. And then you basically are going, there's an option in policies directory where it will just show you all the symbols and you can cut and paste those symbols into a custom holdings group and then set up a deflection.
Alena, I think you have to stop sharing before I can share.
Okay, well, before I relinquish control completely, let me just make sure in case you guys, anyone out there doesn't have this information already. We have a group mailbox, OCLC resource sharing at oclc.org. That is a good way to reach Jenny or Tony or myself. If you have specific questions that came out of this workshop, we're happy to follow up. Like we said, you can also use the chat that's in EventMobi this week. But anytime you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to OCLC support. We have worked very closely with them, especially as we were making changes to automation across the past year to 18 months. And they are very well trained to be able to help in all kinds of areas, all those things, all those workshop topics on, you know, custom holdings groups, constant data, automations, even statistics. So don't hesitate, please, to reach out to them when you're stuck on something. And hopefully, maybe I'll put OCLC resource sharing at oclc.org in the chat. And
Someone already beat you.
Relinquish to. Thank you.
I got it.
And I'll relinquish. Oh, I haven't relinquished. Okay. I don't know.
That's okay.
Did you just take over?
I did just take over.
Okay.
I think this policies directory thing, it's pretty easy once you see it, but it's hard to understand it if you're just hearing it, at least for me. So if you'd want to find all the libraries in Denmark, you can select 10 countries at a time. They're in alphabetical order. Go to Denmark and search.
Oh, yes.
Give you a list of all of the symbols in Denmark. And my favorite is this little blue display symbols button, which pops up a window with all the symbols in the exact format that you need to create a custom holdings group for a deflection. So you can just highlight this and then go over to service configuration and create a custom holdings group with these libraries in it. And then once you do that, you can set up a deflection on your policies tab. So you would create a new deflection. And what you deflect by would be, you would include, custom holdings group. You would include the custom holdings group, and then you would see all of your available custom holdings groups here in a dropdown. You would pick the one that you just created to represent Denmark. And you would have that deflection apply to copies, loans, or both, and make sure it's real-time deflection enabled, and you can name it whatever you want and save it. And that's how you do that.
Good. And hopefully that was a really quick refresher on deflections in general, where they're located.
And then you can check your reasons for no, and you will see the deflection based off country.
You know how many of those requests you're getting. That's great.
Did you see the question, how can we get foreign country libraries to be better lenders? Is there some sort of consortium that we have that I'm not aware of?
Well, there's IFLA, which is the International Federation of Libraries, and they meet, and you know, I don't have much information to go as far as making them better lenders. I would need more information on that.
And I see the question about the email feature. Was that perhaps about notifications? And I
I'm
know,
assuming that's to pasta notifications. Yep.
yeah. Do we have an update on that fix? I keep meaning to ask myself.
I think our developers did a quick look into it and determined they narrowed down where the problem might be and approximately how much time it will take to fix. So it's a matter of scheduling the work at this point. We don't have a date for when a fix will be installed, though.
Okay. We do believe, I think that the notifications are going out.
Yeah.
I think we've seen it, maybe one or two examples where that's questionable, but anytime we've dug into it, it seems like they're going out. It's that they're not showing up in the history, and that's what we've got to get fixed.
But we have prioritized that bug as one of the top bugs that we want to fix, so it will get done.
And can you also deflect requests from all countries except the US?
I was afraid that was going to come up.
That's harder because of the restriction on the number of symbols that can be returned in a search of the policies directory. So what we're looking into doing for that, there's two things. There's something you can do now, but it's purely informational. On the policies directory page in your summary section, there is international lender. And you can have a setting for copies and a setting for loans. And informationally there, you can say United States only. But that doesn't actually stop requests from getting to you. Second thing we're looking at is the concept of dynamic groups, which would come in another year or so, which would let users define groups of libraries based on geography or loan period or amount charged, and have that group membership update automatically as libraries change their policies. So that's something that's coming in the future that we want to do, but isn't here yet.
And here in the last 10 or so minutes, I am going to share my screen and get the door prize up there. The questions can keep flowing, but I just want to put this up for folks so they can see. So you can enter this, this phrase into the event Mobi door prizes tab. And that way start the door prizes game.
I cannot believe you coincidentally picked Crater Lake for our presentation, because I'm so excited. I'm going to hopefully get to go there in September.
Oh, nice.
From Ohio, so you know that's a big deal for me.
It probably won't be quite as snowy, but
no.
Yeah.
be beautiful.
So that's planned. That's like the end of my trip, is to make it down to Crater Lake.
I'm going to speak up and say that I was there. I did a little trip that my significant other and I nicknamed our very volcanic vacation a few years ago. It included Mount St. Helens, Crater Lake, Newberry Volcanic National Park, lava beds, and Lawson. So we hit Washington, Oregon, and Northern California with all the volcanoes.
Perfect.
Or hopefully silent volcanoes. Think
yes. So watch out for the smoke I see. Yes, that's what I'm a little concerned with. So I'll be there at almost the end of September. Hopefully things will be better.
We do have one question in the Q&A. Will there be an OCLC conference in 2022?
Oh, an OCLC, sorry, that was a question for us. I was like, well, of course there'll be an NWILL conference. Yes, I mean, I don't know that there's been anything official stated, but in my mind, 100% it'll be virtual, in terms of, you know, where things are with COVID right now, and how long it takes to get conference sites set up and make those plans. You know, if you've organized a large conference before, you know that you have to secure those venues way ahead of time. You have to put down big deposits, things like that. And I also don't think that the resource sharing conference will be the first conference that OCLC does. I think that they'll probably ease into doing maybe some smaller conferences and some other conferences, not ILL conferences. So I would be pretty confident we're going to do virtual again next spring. We haven't really started talking about it. It felt like the resource sharing conference for us, you know, went from January to June because when we were planning and then executing each of the events. So we've taken a breather over the summer, and we'll probably start talking about it here maybe right after the Labor Day holiday. So.
And I'm gonna stop sharing, but that will be available through the end of tomorrow still on Event Mobi. So if you missed it, you can still find it.